It was the kind of news that shook Thornton Township and Dalton to their...
Tiffany Henyard's tenure as a leader of Dalton and Thornton Township was as divisive as it was controversial, and it culminated in her recent arrest, a dramatic downfall that left the communities she led grappling with the fallout of her administration. Henyard leadership was defined by a series of financial scandals, clashes with critics, and accusations of mismanagement. As her administration progressed, reports of questionable spending began to surface, raising red flags about how public funds were being handled. These issues eventually evolved into a full-blown investigation that uncovered patterns of misconduct, including allegations of public funds being used for personal expenses and attempts to obstruct inquiries into her financial practices. One of the most glaring incidents that raised suspicions involved a $43,000 shopping spree on Amazon that was charged to municipal accounts. This incident sparked widespread outrage from residents and watchdog organizations alike, who viewed it as an egregious misuse of taxpayer dollars. The community expressed their outrage not just at the amount spent but at the apparent disregard for basic fiscal responsibility and transparency. In another widely criticized move, Henyard spearheaded a $2 million project to build a skating rink in the township. This project became a focal point for accusations of reckless spending and fiscal irresponsibility. Many residents questioned the necessity of such an expensive project, particularly when other pressing community needs appeared to be neglected. The rink was widely seen as a vanity project, especially since it was operational primarily during Henyard's personal events, fueling accusations that it was a taxpayer-funded endeavor to promote her own image rather than a genuine attempt to improve the community. Critics of Henyard's administration also accuse her of mismanaging township finances and failing to ensure basic accountability in local governance. Over time, these concerns escalated, creating an atmosphere of distrust and dissatisfaction among the residents. The situation eventually became untenable, prompting federal authorities to step in and investigate her financial dealings. The investigation uncovered a pattern of behavior that suggested Henyard had used public funds for personal expenses, an issue that compounded the growing list of accusations against her. Despite the mounting evidence, Henyard maintained an air of defiance throughout the investigation. She insisted that she was the victim of politically motivated attacks and doubled down on her leadership style. In fact, she went so far as to announce her intention to seek re-election in 2025, claiming that the controversies surrounding her were part of a larger conspiracy to undermine her efforts. Her bold claims, however, were unable to overshadow the growing body of evidence against her. As the investigation progressed and more information came to light, Hen's downfall became inevitable. Her arrest marked the culmination of a series of financial scandals, political missteps, and confrontations with critics that had plagued her administration from the outside. Said the communities of Dalton and Thornton Township were left to grapple with the implications of her leadership, and residents were divided over how to interpret her fall from grace. Some saw her arrest as a long overdue moment of accountability, believing that it was a necessary step toward addressing years of perceived mismanagement. For these residents, the investigation and subsequent legal Battles symbolized an effort to bring transparency and honesty back to local government. Others, however, remained in disbelief, still holding out hope for her innocence and refusing to accept the possibility that their once promising leader could be guilty of such serious misconduct throughout her time in office. Hen's leadership style was often as controversial as her policies. Her approach sparked frequent clashes with the Dalen Village Board of Trustees and other local officials. These tensions were a constant source of drama, and contributed to an atmosphere of dysfunction in the township. Henyard's leadership style was marked by a sense of defiance and a refusal to back down from her positions even in the face of growing opposition. This created an environment in which cooperation and compromise were often difficult to achieve, further exacerbating the challenges facing the community. Despite these challenges, Henyard remained a polarizing figure in Dalton and Thornton Township. Her supporters argued that she was a bold and innovative leader who was willing to take risk in order to improve the community. They pointed to projects like the 2 million skating rink as evidence of her commitment to creating opportunities for local residents. These supporters saw the criticism of her administration as politically motivated and believed that Henyard was being unfairly targeted by her opponents. On the other hand, her detractors argued that her leadership was defined by fiscal irresponsibility, lack of accountability, and a tendency to prioritize personal ambitions over the needs of the community. They criticize her for using public funds to fund projects that seem more focused on her personal image than on addressing the real needs of the township. The 43,000 shopping spree on Amazon along with the controversial skating ring project were seen as clear examples of how Henyard had abused her position for personal gain. Henyard leadership was also marked by a number of failed initiatives and promises that never came to fruition. While she had promised to improve local infrastructure, enhance public services, and create new economic opportunities, many of these initiatives were either delayed or abandoned altogether. The lack of follow-through on these promises further eroded trust in her leadership and added to the perception that her administration was marked by incompetence and mismanagement. The investigation into Henyard's financial dealings only deepened the sense of betrayal felt by many residents. The federal probe uncovered evidence that public funds have been misused, including allegations that Henyard had used township money to pay for personal expenses. These revelations raised serious questions about the integrity of her leadership and the level of oversight that had been applied to her administration's finances. It also revealed a pattern of behavior in which Henyard had allegedly attempted to obstruct inquiries into her financial practices, further damaging her credibility and reputation. As Henyard faces serious legal battles in the coming months, the impact of her leadership on Dalton and Thornton Township will continue to be felt. The scandal surrounding her administration has left a deep divide in the community, with residents now forced to confront the reality of her mismanagement and the implications of her actions. While some may view her arrest as a necessary step toward accountability, others will continue to question whether the true extent of her wrongdoing has been fully revealed in the wake of Henyard's arrest. The communities of Dalton and Thornton Township are at a crossroads. The once promising leader who many had hoped would bring change and progress to the area has now become a symbol of political failure and scandal as the legal proceedings unfold. The residents of these communities will have to decide how to move forward and whether they can rebuild the trust that was lost during Henyard's tumultuous time in office. Henyard from grace marks a dramatic shift for both Dalton and Thornton Township communities, now grappling with the consequences of her controversial leadership. The challenges facing these areas in the wake of her administration will not be easy to overcome, but it is clear that her downfall has forced many to confront the need for greater transparency, accountability, and responsible governance. The legacy of Tiffany Henyard, once seen as a promising and ambitious leader, will now be defined by the controversies and scandals that ultimately led to her arrest and the unraveling of her political career. Tiffany Henyard's tenure as mayor of Dalton and supervisor of Thornton Township was marked by escalating tensions, contentious leadership, and a growing number of scandals that eventually led to her dramatic arrest. Over time, Henyard alienated many of her once strong supporters, particularly members of the township's board of trustees, who grew increasingly frustrated with her leadership style, which they viewed as highly centralized and uncooperative. Henyard's refusal to engage in meaningful collaboration with trustees, her combative rhetoric, and allegations of retaliation against those who oppose her created a toxic environment that undermined the effectiveness of her administration. This divisiveness, coupled with financial mismanagement and allegations of corruption, ultimately led to her downfall and left the community in a state of uncertainty. Her administration was characterized by frequent clashes with Dalton Village Board of Trustees and residents alike. Meetings often spiraled into chaos, with trustees accusing Henyard of overreaching and attempting to consolidate power at the expense of transparency and collaboration. Henyard, for her part, retaliated with claims of sabotage, and these confrontations often became the focal point of heated sessions. In one particularly dramatic incident, Henyard stormed out of a board meeting after being heckled by both trustees and residents. As she walked out, she shouted, "You should all be ashamed of yourselves." This outburst painted a picture of a leader in constant conflict, not only with her critics but with the broader political establishment that she had once been part of. Henyard's combative tendencies extended beyond the council chambers, where tensions ran high. To her social media platforms, she became infamous for live stream grants in which she lashed out at her opponents, branding them as enemies of progress. Henyard frequently claimed that her critics acted out of envy or personal grievances, a sentiment that resonated with some of her supporters but raised serious questions about her professionalism. These public tirades often highlighted her polarizing nature, with some residents cheering her resilience while others found her behavior unbecoming of an elected official. As the tensions grew, allegations of retribution and retaliation began to surface. Some residents feared that Henyard used her power to silence dissent and punish those who opposed her. Critics accuse her of leveraging lawsuits, public shaming, or the strategic allocation of township resources to target individuals or groups who spoke out against her. This only deepened the divisions within the community, as Henyard supporters continued to admire her boldness and claimed that She was a transformative figure while her detractors saw her as a leader who prioritized personal ambition over collective welfare. By the time federal authorities became involved, Henyard's leadership had left Dalton and Thornton Township increasingly fractured, while her supporters held firm in their belief that she was unfairly targeted. Many residents viewed her arrest as a necessary reckoning with the reality of her divisive governance. Henyard's leadership, once celebrated as innovative and transformative, had become synonymous with a series of financial mismanagement scandals, personal retribution, and deepening political conflict. Her arrest marked the abrupt end of a controversial chapter in local politics, but it also raised difficult questions about the future of the community she once led. The seeds of Henyard's downfall were sown in the earliest days of her administration, when her leadership style became a source of tension within her own ranks. She alienated key allies, including those on the board of trustees who had initially supported her policies but grew disillusioned with her increasingly autocratic approach. One of Henyard's former assistants, Carmen Carlisle, became a vocal critic of her leadership, accusing Henyard of disregarding established procedures in favor of pursuing her personal agendas. She doesn't consult anyone, it's her way or the highway, Carlisle claimed in a recent interview. This sentiment was echoed by several trustees who grew frustrated with the lack of transparency and the increasing centralization of power under Henyard's leadership. One of the key points of contention was Henyard's tendency to bypass board meetings and make important decisions without consulting with trustees. Critics argued that the mayor's failure to engage with the board of trustees undermined the democratic process and made it difficult for the township to function effectively. One trustee emphasized the importance of engagement, saying, "You need to show up to board meetings whether you agree or disagree. You have to vote." These mounting tensions reach a tipping point when Henyard made critical appointments without board approval, further deepening the rift between her and the trustees. One of the most controversial appointments during Henyard's tenure was the hiring of Ronald Burge as Dalton's police chief, despite reports that his state certification was inactive at the time. This decision sparked outrage among trustees who argued that it was illegal to hire someone for such a key position without ensuring that all necessary qualifications were met. However, a judge later ruled that Burge could serve in an interim capacity, which only fueled the fire of the ongoing power struggle between Henyard and the board. One trustee accused Henyard of showing a blatant disregard for proper procedures, a claim that became emblematic of the growing frustrations with her leadership style. Allegations of intimidation also plagued Henyard's administration. Critics accused her of using her position to silence dissent and consolidate her authority. The combination of these allegations, along with the broader claims of financial mismanagement, painted a picture of a leader increasingly isolated from the community and embroiled in controversy. Henyard's combative rhetoric and unilateral decision-making alienated those around her, and her inability to address these concerns only deepen a sense of dysfunction within the administration. Perhaps the most serious allegations against Henyard involve her handling of township finances. Trustees accuse her of withholding financial records, forging signatures, and bypassing board approval. to push through projects and decisions that align with her own agenda. One former trustee described her tactics as a shell game, alleging that Henyard moved funds around to obscure deficits and finance unauthorized projects. What was initially presented as a budget surplus under Henyard leadership was later revealed to be a facade masking millions of dollars in debt. This revelation came to light through a preliminary audit commissioned by the township, which painted a grim picture of systemic mismanagement and a shocking lack of oversight. Henyard dismissed the audit report as a politically motivated attack, claiming that her critics were simply jealous and attempting to undermine her efforts to serve the community. Despite the growing backlash, she remained defiant, using public events such as turkey giveaways and holiday parties to maintain her public presence and rally her base. These events, which critics described as distractions from the controversies surrounding her administration, allowed Henyard to continue portraying herself as the victim of a political conspiracy. She regularly took the social media platform forms like Facebook Live to lash out at her detractors, often referring to them as Judas figures and vowing to sue everyone involved in what she claimed was an elaborate scheme to destroy her reputation. Her combative rhetoric and defiance only deepened the divisions within the community, while her supporters continue to cheer her resilience. Many residents began to question her ability to govern effectively in the face of such serious allegations. The financial mismanagement claim struck at the heart of her administration's credibility, eroding trust among township residents and leaving the community grappling with the fallout of years of purported fiscal irresponsibility. Henyard's tenure ultimately became a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked authority. The combination of financial scandals, allegations of retaliation, and a divisive leadership style turned her time in office into a turbulent period for Dalton and Thornton Township. The one celebrated super mayor who had risen to prominence with promises of transformative leadership left behind a township mired in debt, dysfunction, and disillusionment. As Henyard arrest unfolded, it sent shock waves through the South suburban political landscape. Many residents of Dalton and Thornton Township viewed her downfall as a long overdue reckoning, while others, particularly her supporters, framed it as a politically motivated attack on a young black woman in a position of power. The FBI had been quietly investigating Henyard for months, gathering financial records and witness testimonies related to her roles in Dalton and Doran Township. Reports indicated that the investigation had expanded to include her political committee and charitable activities amid allegations of money laundering and the misuse of public funds. As the news of Henyard's arrest broke, reactions within the community were mixed. Supporters accused the FBI of targeting Henyard because of her position and her efforts to challenge the political establishment, while critics saw the arrest as a first step toward justice for years of alleged mismanagement and corruption. The investigation reportedly uncovered troubling patterns of governance, including the diversion of public funds for personal projects and campaign activities. Henyard's arrest left the future of Dalton and Thornton Township uncertain, with residents and trustees alike grappling with the aftermath of her controversial leadership. Calls for new leadership gained traction, with many urging the need to restore trust and integrity in local government. One Trustee commented this community deserves transparency and responsible leadership. We need to focus on rebuilding. The question of what comes next for Dalton and Thornton Township remains unclear. Will Henyard fight the charges, potentially staging a comeback? Or has this marked the definitive end of her political journey? Only time will tell, but one thing is certain: this dramatic chapter in the township's history is far from over for many Hens' political career has left behind a legacy marred by scandal, controversy, and unresolved tensions. The unfolding legal battles and the continued scrutiny of her administration will undoubtedly shape her legacy and the future of the communities she once led. Whether she is ultimately found guilty or exonerated, the fallout from her tenure has forced Dalton and Thornton Township to confront the importance of transparency, accountability, and community trust in